let's check out this anime. So
Absolute dumpster fire, the internet told me. The animation is trash, the voice acting is trash, the dialogue sucks, and there's some Twitter controversy about hating men. And I'm a man, so therefore I have to be offended. I had to see what was so terrible about High Guardian Spice. So I went in and watched the first episode, ready to absolutely tear it to shreds, and it wasn't terrible. But it wasn't good either. You've probably heard the criticisms before, or have at least seen a couple clips on YouTube and have noticed the JPEG images in the background, or how the voice actors seem to be using tin cans as their microphones, or even just how utterly incompetent it is in regards to literally every aspect of production. But all those things aside, it could have been worse. I didn't have a terrible time watching it, I wasn't suffering, and it never did anything.
it looks like it looks more like a cartoon production than an anime, to be honest. Like modern cartoon, right?
In particular to make me angry, it was just sorta not great. This show is basically the cartoon equivalent of the cheapest gluten-free bread you could find. There's nothing technically wrong with it, you can't really get mad at it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have any nutrients, it doesn't have any flavor, it doesn't have anything. It's just boring, lifeless, tasteless bread. It lacks so many of the most basic storytelling concepts that are needed in order to make a story interesting, and because of this, I couldn't even bring myself to be interested enough to continue watching anything beyond the first episode. So yeah, many of the following criticisms could turn out to be wrong in the long run, but I'll never know because it failed to make me care enough to want to continue. This is how not to start a story. This is how High Guardian Spice fails in one episode. Part 1. These characters have absolutely no personality. After much thought and trying my very hardest to determine exactly what kind of personality these two have, this was the only thing I could think of. This girl is the slightly responsible one sometimes, and this girl is the slightly irresponsible one sometimes. That's it. These are supposed to be your main characters. They are whose journey we are meant to be following, and the majority of the show will be focused on them. I need to care about them, but I cannot care about them if I can't even identify more than a single character trait each of them has. And no
Okay, usually the thing is like it is true that, like when you think about anime or any type of media, like at least like the main character is memorable to a certain way. So yeah, but at the same time, like some development, like some TV shows allow themselves like multiple episodes to actually like make their anime like kind of come to life. But yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going. It's interesting. But like to me, this is not an anime. This is a cartoon. Sorry, like I
So
cannot.
I'm not saying that in order to make a good character, you should just have a giant list of traits. That's not how it works. Really, if you want to establish character, you need to do it through character moments. Or in other words, action. You show and don't tell. Whenever a character chooses to do something, that is a show of who they are. It doesn't matter as much how it happens because the action itself tells you so much more about the character than words can. And the more of these character moments you get, the more we learn about them, and as a result, we care. Konosuba, for example, is a master of this. If you think that I'm not giving High Guardian Spice a fair chance because it hasn't had enough time or something, Konosuba establishes light years more personality within its first 5 minutes. There is no excuse because establishing personality is a process that only takes seconds. Now, I'm not gonna
This is true. This is true though. But like, I don't know how bad it is. But like, yeah, I don't know. It must be really, really fucking bad if the dude tells you like no personality at all. Now I think I understand what he means by no personality, because like thinking about like any anime, there wasn't like an anime where I was like, I don't feel it doesn't even feel human, you know, like it doesn't feel like lively. But like it does, like firstly, it's a cartoon. Like fuck that. Like they just like stamped the anime part on this, but like it's a cartoon. Like it follows like the character design of cartoons.
go into detail about it since I already made an entire video on it, but the difference between Konosuba and High Guardian Spice is that in Konosuba, everything that happens because a character made it happen. In High Guardian Spice, things just happen because they happen. It never comes from the characters, all they ever do is react to the stuff that happens to them, just following the plot instead of making the plot happen. That's weak character writing. Okay, I went through the entirety of the first episode of High Guardian Spice and mapped out everything that happened beat by beat, and out of all the moments in the entire episode, that's 19 plot beats, the only ones where one of the main characters makes any kind of active decision that establishes any kind of character are these three. That's not a lot. and you could take 2 of them out, nothing would change. The first is the scene where they decide to cut the line at the train.
Let's cut the line.
Rosemary, that would be wrong. I'm thinking we should cut the line.
The second is the scene where Rose gets impatient at Sage to finish eating and pressures her to hurry up so they could go.
You ready? Give me just a minute.
With the music, it makes it sound even more stupid.
Maybe I'll take it to go. Great.
And the third is the scene where Rose swings her sword around like a moron and almost hurts someone.
Danger is like a flock of birds. It swoops all into your business when you least expect it. Aha! Wah!
And guess what? All 3 of these moments establish the exact same thing. Rose is kind of a jerk. All that these moments show is that Rose just doesn't seem to care that much about other people, which I'm pretty sure wasn't the intention of the writers since they gloss over these scenes as if they're nothing. There is a concept of storytelling called the save the cat moment, where a character goes out of their way to do something nice for someone or something without expecting anything in return. This especially matters if they're a not very good person with a lot of character flaws because it shows us that there's still a part of them worth caring about, that they're human and have the potential to grow. Throughout this entire episode, Rose doesn't do a single nice thing for anyone, and this is
Let me just check one thing. Okay.
supposed to be someone we like. Seriously, the scene where they cut the line would have been perfect for this. When the orc guy crashes and gets stuck on the bridge, they could have helped him. But they didn't. They just ignored him and moved on. Yeah, it would have been cliche, but it would have been something.
Might want to make sure your friend doesn't stab anyone while you're out here sightseeing.
We aren't tourists, and nobody actually got stabbed.
This scene with Rose swinging around her sword is especially stupid for so many reasons. Why are you the one getting annoyed at her? You almost stabbed her! And why are you getting angry at the fact that she said you were sightseeing? That's literally what you were just doing! What made you think you were being called a tourist? How was being called a tourist an insult in the first place? What were they even going for in this scene? I don't get it!
I like her.
Well, I don't! What's funny about all this is that the writers don't even seem to be aware of the fact that Rose is kind of a jerk. From the way she's portrayed, they seem to think she's just quirky or relatable, but she's not. She's just unlikable. Throughout all of these scenes, Rose is portrayed as if she's being totally reasonable, that it's not a big deal that you're pressuring your friend to hurry up or stop eating just because you finished early instead of having the decency to wait 5 minutes, because that's what good friends do. I wouldn't have a problem with any of this if the writers actually had the self-awareness to portray these flaws as flaws rather than just thinking they're quirky character traits, or at least giving her even just
How is this an anime? Okay, like this is just a film cartoon. Okay, like why the fuck did they call it an anime?
one save the cat moment, no matter how small, but as it stands, both our main character and the rest of the characters have no character. I don't care about them, I don't even like them, and it's not just the characters that I don't care about, because guess what? The plot sucks too. Part 2, the plot. This plot is about as uninspired as you can possibly get. Are a bunch of characters going to a magical academy to learn magic and they go on a bunch of adventures? I've never seen that before. Seriously, when I told my siblings the synopsis behind this show, they just went, "Isn't that Little Witch Academia?" Okay, to make things clear, there's nothing wrong with this premise by itself. There are plenty of anime and other media that have shown that this can be done well. The problem here is that it isn't. In order for a plot to be interesting, the writer must ask themselves, what do the characters want? Why do they want it? What's stopping them from getting it? And what happens if they don't get it? Well, High Guardian Spice only has the answer to one of these questions. They want to be guardians. And why do they want to be guardians? I have no idea. It seems to vaguely have something to do with Rose and her mom's disappearance, but it isn't clear. And at this point, we're not even sure exactly what a guardian is or what they do. And while you could say that that's an explanation that comes later and I just needed to be patient, this is a really important part of the story that should be explained as soon as possible. The fact
So there is like also something that like makes this analysis interesting is that so what was it called in the TV show industry actually, where is it, So in the TV show industry, and it is a TV show, like when you are trying to promote a new TV show, you go by what is called a pilot. A pilot episode is basically one episode that is completely rendered or completely like complete completely complete that is absolutely that is using full production, right? So you can basically you use it you spend like resources on one pilot episode, and this pilot episode is used then to promote your TV show to businesses to production, how's it called, fuck, to mm, to production, like to the production industry, right? And so to different types of different type of like basically like corporation, like cinema corporations, cinema big businesses that will actually like watch your pilots and will tell you, we will invest for this to not be up to for we will invest in your TV show for it to not have only for it to continue, right? So there is the story of like everyone loves The Office, right? The Office almost got rejected because of its pilot, the pilot episode, and the pilot episode is the first episode of the TV show. Same with, I think, Rick and Morty, right? I don't know though in Japan if they are actually using pilot episodes to actually like promote themselves, because it goes from like the manga, and the manga becomes like an anime, and so because of that yeah, because of that, like it functions differently. But basically the pilot episode is the most important episode of a TV show, in a way that it is supposed to explain most of the motivations, present most of the characters, and explain the story well enough for you to be able to go from businesses to basically sponsors, right? From sponsor to fucking like get money to get production, to get to produce your TV show. And this is really interesting. Like this is really interesting because like a lot of like well-known TV shows that are kind of like wacky, you know, that's kind of like out there, you know, kind of like The Office, like The Office, Rick and Morty. I'll search for um yeah, Games of Thrones, Park and Recreation, like like yeah, so you can see that like a lot of them were actually quite fucking uh quite fucking like are quite fucking well known TV shows that actually like went through a pilot that was like questionable. Well, for TV shows like The Office, for TV shows like Park and Recreation, it is actually like complicated to actually like, because it's a comedy show and stuff like that, it's actually complicated to make it so make it like really like make it valuable, make it explainable. You get me, right? It's difficult to actually like promote it in a way that like you're you know that you'll be able to explain your product well, right? And but yeah, so actually it is so pilots episodes is basically like the bread and butter, the blood and bones of like the TV show industry. You have a good pilot, people sign you up. You have a bad pilot, your TV show will never be aired. I know that like there is some more, it's more complicated than that, but overall there is a lot of that. And so is analysis of like this TV show is this anime, this fucking cartoon, let's fucking say it. It's actually interesting because like it judged this TV show just like other people, like people in the cinema industry will judge pilots. And so like this is I was like, yeah, maybe, but like it's actually a really good, interesting exercise, and a good way to also like well, analyze piece of media.
The fact that this is sidelined to instead make room for a bunch of pointless world building is a failure in itself, but more on that soon. They treat the characters wanting to be guardians as if it's a given. Of course they want to be guardians, that's what you're supposed to do in a fantasy story. At this point, it relies so much on the established tropes of its genre that it doesn't really seem to care about the fact that it barely has a plot. Characters still need motivation and reason for wanting to do the things that they do. And the most infuriating thing about all this is that the solution was right there. In the middle of the episode, Rose has a dream that basically tells us that Rose's mom disappeared, right? All they had to do was just connect the two things. Rose's mom disappeared, so she wants to become a guardian so she can find her. Ta-da! You now have an interesting premise that actually sounds like an anime. And for the people who have actually watched all the way through and are now screaming at me because it turns out that's exactly what the premise of the show is, and I'd know that if I just watched one more episode, let me say this. This should have been established to us straight away. There is no reason to hide this information from us. All it does is just make us less sympathetic towards Rose and makes me not interested in watching how the story plays out. The fact that we don't even have a why for these characters doing anything means that we can't understand or connect with them. Instead, we're just watching them do stuff without any real reason behind it, and we feel like we know nothing about them because we don't. And if I was right and Rose never does have any real motivation for wanting to become a guardian, then that speaks for itself. Okay, everything I just talked about only covers the first two questions, but the second two are equally as important. Which brings me to my next point. The majority of episode 1 is a massive waste of time. Going back to these two questions, if a character wants something, something else needs to stop them from getting it. And it doesn't hurt to make it so that there are negative consequences if they don't get what they want. So that's conflict and stakes. With the hypothetical situation I was talking about before with Rose wanting to become a guardian to find her mom, this would also introduce stakes since it means that her mom's life is in danger and she needs to save her before she dies or whatever. It all connects. Okay, but high stakes aren't absolutely essential. They're nice, but they don't have to be there from the very beginning, so it's okay if High Guardian Spice doesn't have that. The main thing I do want to focus on is the lack of conflict. This entire episode is almost completely devoid of any kind of conflict. That's not good. If you want to know why that's a bad thing, it's because conflict is quite literally the most important thing in a story. That and the characters. Ask any competent writer. So if you don't have those things, you're gonna get a really crappy story. So like in the beginning, they need to get to their school, and in order to do that, they need to catch the train. So what do? They catch the train. And that's it. But hey, look at all this cool world building. Then they need to find their caretakers. So they find them. And that's it. But hey, look at all this cool world building. Next, they need to go home. So they go home. And have a nice breakfast in the morning. But hey, look at all this cool. Are we seeing the problem here? We're halfway through the episode and not a single thing of substance has actually happened yet. There's no conflict whatsoever. Nothing has stopped them or gotten in the way or nothing.
Yeah, and basically like there is no challenge to the story. So basically you just see people do people stuff with no reason or real motivation. Which is actually, I understand what he means, like especially when it's like mixed, because like if you have like motivations, you can like anime is like pre-ran sometimes. Like they're like spend an episode without like many like much resistance to it, right? Stuff happens and it just happens, but like because of the actual world building, actual motivations that you understand, well, basically it doesn't matter because like you like the characters. Here it's just like stale on it's like stale with stale a stale environment with a stale world building with stale characters.
Nothing has gone wrong, which makes me feel like all these scenes are pointless since you could easily skip over all of it and lose absolutely nothing. But hey, at least we got all this cool world building. Okay, so we're
Yeah, in free run, like you could skip like some scenes and lose nothing out of it, but because you're attached to the characters and because it creates world building and because you get to connect with the characters, like I think that like he also mentions that like there is no character development in the sense that like they do all the stuff, and I'm pretty sure that like it doesn't allow you to know them better, right? In free run, you could skip a lot of scenes, a lot of different scenes, and still be and pretty much miss nothing. But you will miss like some connections and some details about like free run or other characters like you will love to have.
past the halfway point now, and we get to the scene where Rose swings her sword around. Okay, it finally looks like we're gonna get some conflict here. The girl gets reasonably pissed off at them, it looks like there's gonna be an argument, and she walks away. Really? Okay, whatever, that's fine. Let's just move on. In the next scene, we finally get something when a Trixie steals Rose's locket and they need to get it back. It's not much, and at this point we don't fully understand why it's important to her, and it doesn't really seem to have anything to do with anything else that's happened, and also feels like we're just getting kind of sidetracked, but hey, it's something. So after a few minutes of chasing, they finally track it down to the forest. Okay, great. They see the locket there on the floor, they're ready to go get it, and then more pointless world building. Look, I get it. You have a bunch of cool concepts and you want to show them off. But this is not the way you do it. World building is supposed to support the plot and characters, not the other way around. You can't spend the majority of your runtime doing nothing but showing off these concepts and just forget about the story. That's not how it works. They need to support each other by properly integrating the world building into the plot in a way that feels natural. This doesn't do that. After the scene, Rose's locket breaks, but I'm gonna skip over that for now since I'm gonna talk about that soon anyways. So now they need to get it fixed. So what do? They meet a character who can get it fixed, they go home, they wake up and go to school, and that's the end of the episode. We have gone through the entire episode and 90% of it was completely useless. Because the writers seem more concerned about its world building than having an interesting plot, you could skip to the scene where they get to school and you wouldn't miss out on anything. Yeah, there were a bunch of characters introduced, but we're gonna see them anyways at the school since they're already going there. And as for the caretakers, you could easily fill in the gaps since when they come home from school, it's pretty obvious they're the ones taking care of them. You don't really need to explain that. Okay, now at the very least, we do get a scene that makes some attempt at emotional substance, and that's the moment where Rose's locket breaks and it's revealed what the picture is inside. Honestly, it's probably the strongest part of the episode. I mean, that's not saying a lot considering this is High Guardian Spice, but I at least appreciate the attempt. I'm glad the episode didn't put too much emphasis on it and let it have some form of subtlety, but even so, it still has a bunch of problems. Main one being that this is a moment that centers around Rose's family, when we barely know anything about her family. We know they exist, but when it comes to their actual relationship, there's nothing. The show hasn't done enough to fully earn this moment, and because of that, it falls flat. And besides that, there's also just the fact that it doesn't make any sense if you think about it for a little bit. Why did Rose make the main part of the picture the cheesecake specifically and not her actual family? Was she hiding it from Sage? Why? If she was hiding it and she lied to her, then that doesn't make sense either, because just a few scenes prior, we see that Sage already knows about Rose's problem, so there's no point. Overall, this moment falls flat because it just didn't have the proper setup or thought behind it to earn it. But again, at least it didn't dwell too much on it and moved on from it quickly, so I'll give it points for that. But in the end, because of this episode's massive lack of conflict, everything that happened in this episode felt like a total waste of time. I'm not saying the episode should have just started with them going to school, since having a proper setup is really important. I'm saying that it should have made the things that did happen up until this point have a point. And in order to do that, things can't always go as planned, and there needs to be some form of purposeful conflict during the things that happen. Little Witch Academia is a show that many people have compared this to, and that's because it's basically the same concept as High Guardian Spice, except
Except it's an anime. You can see the art style. It's like you can see it's an anime.
done right. The very first thing it does is make it crystal clear as to what Akko wants and why. She's inspired by Shiny Chariot's performance, and because of that, she wants to be like her someday and become an amazing witch. Easy. That's her motivation. So the next thing it establishes is that Akko can't use magic. She isn't born into a witch family and she has no idea how to use magic. And yet she remains cheerful and optimistic and decides she's going to do it anyways. That's both establishing the main conflict of the series and tells us a lot about Akko's character and personality. Then she tries to find the bus stop to the school and can't find it. If she doesn't get there in time, then the doors close and she can't enroll. That's conflict and stakes. Then she meets Sushi. Then she meets Susie by crashing into her, who in response to her over enthusiasm gives her a handshake of snakes, which turns out to be a bunch of rope. Character. Then she tries and fails to get to the ley line since she can't use magic. Conflict. She meets Lotte, who decides to help Akko and give her a ride despite being in a hurry of her own and never having flown 2 people before. That's a save the cat and character moment. Then everything goes wrong and they all fall into the Forbidden Forest where Susie tricks them into being chased by a giant chicken. Are we seeing the pattern here? This continues throughout the entire episode. Every single thing that happens either has conflict or character or many times both. They have goals, motivation, obstacles that stop them from reaching those goals, and nothing ever goes according to plan, and we get tons and tons of character establishing moments. It even has a bunch of world building details, but this time it actually plays a part in the story rather than distracting from it. High Guardian Spice does none of these things. The difference is light and day. And the thing is, Little Witch Academia didn't even do anything special. These are just the basics. It just uses the same storytelling techniques that any anime with somewhat competent writing would use. Plus it has decent animation and production value. But with all that said, all of these things aren't even the worst part about the show.
This looks like, you know, like the video games that were like basically using JPEGs, using images from the internet to create like an environment, 2D, 3D environment. Like check out this fucking wall. Look at how different the texture is from this fucking wall to this. This looks like the fucking like the first like video games on PC for children.
To me, a show doesn't have to have perfect writing or production value in order to work. It doesn't have to have the most mind-blowing ideas or funny one-liners or anything like that. In my Konosuba video, I mentioned about how whenever everyone working on a project puts a lot of passion and effort towards it and have a ton of fun doing it, you can tell. But what I didn't mention was how the opposite can be true as well. All of the problems I've talked about throughout this entire video are really just symptoms of a bigger issue. And that's that nobody ever felt like they really tried. This entire episode, on every level of production, from the voice actors to the animators, the composers, and especially the writers, felt half-assed. Budget here wasn't an issue. Konosuba had a shoestring budget, even for most anime, and none of their voice actors or anyone else on the team from what I know of were well known at the time. And yet they still managed to create something amazing. Something imperfect and flawed, sure, but it had life to it. High Guardian Spice doesn't have that. I can forgive flawed writing and I can overlook cheap production value, but what I won't forgive is laziness. And I believe the main reason it feels so lazy is simple. From what it seems like, this was made for political reasons rather than artistic ones. Now, to make things clear, there is nothing wrong with having political ideologies and storytelling. In fact, some of the greatest movies and shows are centered around that. And there's nothing wrong with representation either. In fact, I can agree. I encourage more representation of minorities in more mainstream shows. That's a good thing. But the difference is that these movies understand how to integrate those ideologies into the story in a way that enhances its themes and creates something meaningful. Many other shows, however, don't do that. Instead, they act as if because they're doing something that's in support of their particular political belief, that the actual story is irrelevant. That because they have all this representation, because they have all of this quote-unquote diversity in their staff, that they don't need to work to make something good. And if anyone dares to criticize what the end result is, it's not because they think the writing's bad, it's because they disagree with your political ideologies. And at that point, the show isn't really a show anymore. It's propaganda. The fact that the very first trailer
That's a good point, yeah.
for High Guardian Spice tells us absolutely nothing about the actual show and only seems to care about the type of people who are making it is very telling for where their priorities were. The writers, from what it seems like, didn't really care about telling a good story that anyone could enjoy. All they cared about was pandering to a very specific target audience who'll love it no matter how bad it is, purely because they have the same political beliefs. Do you want to know
And this is basically
Who
manipulation.
else does that? Crappy Christian cartoons. Yep, these things, they do almost the same thing. It's pretty ironic that despite having the most opposing beliefs, these two are on the same level. The sad thing about all of this is that in the end, they're really achieving the opposite of what they were trying to do. Think about it, if the majority of movies and anime don't have this kind of representation, but the few that do suck, what does that say about your community? Shouldn't it be the other way around? That because you're one of the few shows that can represent your community, that you should try your absolute hardest to make something decent? I'm not saying High Guardian Spice had to do all of the things I talked about in order to work. Heck, many of my favorite shows are ones that break the rules of storytelling, and many of the shows that I cited as examples don't do all of these things either. All High Guardian Spice needed to do was at least do one of these things well. Anything, something that showed that these people gave a damn about its characters or its plot rather than just viewing it as a product. My biggest problem with High Guardian Spice isn't poor dialogue or lack of conflict, lack of good character writing, or its terrible production value. My problem with it is what it represents. And no, it doesn't represent the LGBTQ community, it represents a mindset. A mindset that says, I don't need to try.
Yeah, this is actually a fair point. I don't need I don't need to try because of who I am. And usually the political agenda of many of these like art creations are actually like it's really sad because he is right. Usually if you are behind the political agenda and if you do basically propaganda, because like there's a difference between promotion and propaganda, right? But if you see yourself as all righteous, like basically it's propaganda, right? If you understand that like it doesn't matter what message you are trying to share, that you need to play by the books, play by the rules, and actually create something entertaining and allow people to actually like question it, like then this is promotion, right? And yeah, I completely understand. So basically it is sad, but like at the same time it's not an anime, it's not an anime.
Or who knows, maybe it does get better and this entire video was a pointless waste of time. My name is Brandon Riley, donate to Team C, like the video, follow me on Twitter, and I made this video the way I did because I couldn't be bothered to watch the entirety of High Guardian Spice.
This was really interesting. This was really interesting. And yeah. All right. I want to talk about it for like 20 more hours.